thanks so much for that. And it's nice to have some good news to report now. The Australian Indigenous Education Foundation is doing some fantastic work providing young Indigenous Australians with a chance at a great education. There are several hundred Indigenous children and students in this program now. I spoke to the founder of it, Andrew Penfold, a bit earlier in the day, and he has been in Canberra with two of his young scholars, and they met with the Prime Minister and Opposition Leader, among others.
That's right. So last year we did some surveying, and through Newspoll actually we found that 2/3 of Australians think they'll never see an Aboriginal Prime Minister in their lifetime. So we conducted a campaign to raise awareness about some of the positive things that are happening in the Indigenous area. And part of that was that we created a competition for about 400 Indigenous kids who are on scholarships through the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation. And the winning entries of those, their prize was to come to Canberra and meet the Prime Minister. So they've been down here today, they've met with the Prime Minister, they've met with the Leader of the Opposition, they've met with the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, and Ken Wyatt, the first member of the House of Representatives, and Senator Nova Peris, first female senator in the Parliament. So they've really had this great exposure today to meet the leaders.
And the scholars, to win this competition, had to set out their vision. If they were to be the first Indigenous Prime Minister, their vision for the country. What were some of the things that they articulated?
So the two main things, so we had one young lady from Lera Normanhurst in Sydney called Riarna, and she's from Coonabarabran in New South Wales. She was very passionate about how social media is overtaking people's lives to the detriment, and that kids aren't being healthy and getting outdoors and enjoying all the activities of life, and that technology's kind of swung a little bit too far. She's also very passionate about education and making sure that other children get access to the same sort of quality of education that she's had, as she sees that as such a critical thing. One of the other boys who won is Jerome, who's from Mount Isa in Queensland, and he's very interested in constitutional recognition and the amendments to the Constitution on that current campaign. Again, very strong about education. Also making sure, Australians are working productively with the mining industry around native title and how, some of those issues can be played out in terms of negotiating and working with mining companies for royalties and access to land for mining and things. So a fairly broad range of topics there.
The Australian Indigenous Education Foundation has been in operation now, since 2008, first intake in 2009. Give us a sense of where things are at. How many students have you got in the program now, and have any graduated from university at this point?
So it's really been a blistering growth. We signed a contract with the federal government in 2009. They invested $20 million in our program and then challenged us to match that with another $20 million from the private sector. And they gave us 20 years to do that, but we actually hit that in about 2.5 years to reach that $40 million target. And last year we started a new target to try and lift that to $140 million. And the idea of that is we want to provide scholarships for about 7,000 kids over the next 20 years to get access to the best schools in the country and the best universities in the country, and then of course to transition into successful careers. So since 2008, when we started this organisation, we've had about nearly 600 students through the program, including the current students who are in the intake now. And we're now running at about 400 students a year in secondary school, plus about another 50 at university. So far we've had the highest Year 12 retention and completion rate in the country of any program, which is great. We're running at over 90%, which is...
Of any Indigenous program?
Yes, so it's got the highest rate of retention and Year 12 completion of any Indigenous program in the country. So we've got a completion and retention rate over 90%, and as you know, the national average is around 50%, so it's nearly double the national average. And what's even more great to see is that of those kids finishing, 95% of them are productively moving into university and jobs and so on. So I've had 150 graduates already, and as I say, over 90% or 95% of those are in jobs and university and so on. And interestingly,
have you had any get through their university degrees, graduate at the other end of the tertiary studies as well?
We've had one young man who we supported at university who did a medical degree, and he's now working as a doctor in Newcastle. There's another young lady who did optometry at university on a scholarship, and she's now the first Indigenous optometrist in New South Wales. Another young lady who's about to finish a law degree at UNSW this year in her final year, and we're now helping her transition her career. So we're seeing the kids come out in small numbers, but now we're at the stage where we're getting up to so last year we had 65 kids finish Year 12. as we scale up now, we'll be having 100 kids coming out, 200 kids a year coming out of school, going to university and into jobs. And when we look across the board at the alumni who have completed school already or completed university, about nearly 40% of those kids are in law, medicine and engineering. So some really great outcomes we're seeing there in terms of the career progress.
How many schools are involved nationwide? Because obviously if you're talking about those numbers, you've got to have a substantial number of schools cooperating. Do they make contributions as well, or is it the fund that basically pays the full way for the Indigenous students?
Yeah, so we're currently working with about 35 schools across Australia. There's 200 boarding schools in Australia. We're working with 35 of them at the moment. And as we raise more money and more funds, we continue to expand the number of schools we work with and the number of places that we can offer. And of course, we're looking for schools that have really got a proven commitment and a proven record of success with educating Indigenous children. The schools do make a very big contribution. In terms of the fees, we pay the fees and we pay the incidentals and so on for the kids to be able to access school, and then we provide wraparound support for mentoring and career transition support and so on. The contribution the schools make is really around providing supports for those kids to be successful in their education. So academic support, learning support, visiting communities, employing Indigenous liaison teachers and pastoral care people. So really making sure that their effort and their resources and their energy is going into the outcomes and ensuring we get successful outcomes. And of course, we've had a lot of success with raising the money to enable that to happen. And, last year has really been probably our most successful year to date.
That's good news, and hopefully it may prosper for many years to come. Andrew Penfold, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Andrew Penfold there, the founder and chief executive of the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation, doing some fine work. A quick break on PM Agenda. Back in a moment.